On Mother's Day, my son, a young, wealthy, and busy businessman, came to visit me holding a bouquet as bright as the morning Sunday. He placed it on the table, looked at me with a gentle but distant expression, and said, "Mom, my wife still sends you $10,000 every month, right? I just want to make sure you're comfortable." I froze. My heart started pounding. $10,000? For the past 8 months, I'd been living on food packages from the church and small donations from kind neighbors. Before I continue, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge. I want to know how far it's gone. I smiled at my son, forcing my trembling hands to stay still on the kitchen table. "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly, "what money are you talking about?" He blinked, confused, his brows furrowing slightly as if I were teasing him. "The allowance, Mom, the one Nora's been sending you every month? She told me she set up automatic transfers after Dad passed. You didn't get them?" There was a pause, heavy and stretching like silence before a storm. I could see the exact moment the realization flickered in his eyes, a flicker of doubt that he quickly masked with a polite smile. "Maybe there's been some mistake," he said, his tone too calm, too rehearsed. "I'll talk to her about it." Nora. Even her name left a bitter taste in my mouth. My daughter-in-law was beautiful, always dressed in designer brands, her hair done perfectly, her perfume too strong for my little house. She had this way of speaking to me, sweet words wrapped in ice. It wasn't what she said, but how she said it. Like every word was a favor. When she first entered my son's life, I wanted to love her. I really did. I told myself she was just adjusting, that her coldness came from city life, not arrogance. But the truth was clear long before this day. She had never wanted me around. That Mother's Day visit was short. My son, Evan, left after an hour, apologizing for being busy, kissing me lightly on the forehead like someone patting a fragile memory. Nora stayed behind just long enough to help clean up. She stood in my small kitchen, her long red nails gliding over the countertop like she was inspecting a piece of cheap furniture. "You know, Evelyn," she said with that silky voice of hers, "Evan worries about you. You really should check your account more often. Technology isn't as complicated as you think." I could hear the mockery under her tone. I forced a smile, clutching the dish towel tighter. "I do check, Nora. There hasn't been anything." She tilted her head, her lips curling into a pitying smile. Must be a bank error then. I'll make sure it's fixed." But she didn't. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The church's food pantry became my lifeline. I'd walk home with a small bag of canned soup and cereal, praying it would last until Sunday. My electricity bill went unpaid for 2 months, and I found myself sitting by candlelight, remembering a time when this house was filled with warmth and laughter. Back when my husband, Charles, was alive, we'd sit out on the porch every evening, sipping coffee and watching the sunset fade over the Texas hills. After he died, I promised myself I'd keep the home standing, not just as a roof, but as a reminder of love, family, and the life we built. But slowly, that promise began to crumble. Each time I saw Nora's name pop up on the news, at charity galas, photographed beside Evan's company banners, I wondered how she could smile so easily while I sat in the dark. $10,000 a month. What kind of person steals from a widow, from her own husband's mother, and sleeps peacefully at night? I started keeping notes, small details, dates. Every time Evan mentioned money, every time Nora stopped by with a fake smile and a new excuse, I wrote it all down in a little brown notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. I wasn't planning revenge then, not yet. I was planning survival. But something inside me was shifting, a quiet strength that comes from being dismissed for too long. You know that moment when pain stops feeling like pain and starts feeling like focus? That's what happened to me. One night, while drinking lukewarm tea under the flickering light of a single lamp, I whispered to myself, "No one's coming to save you, Evelyn. You have to save yourself." And that was the night I decided I'd find the truth. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have called your son right away and risked breaking his heart? Or would you have waited, like I did, praying for a sliver of proof before tearing your family apart? I didn't know then, but I was about to discover just how far betrayal can go when greed wears the mask of love. The following week, I walked to the bank. I remember the smell of the air that morning, dry, dusty, with the faint sweetness of the wildflowers blooming along the road. I wore my best dress, the one Charles used to say made me look like spring in person, though the fabric had begun to fade from too many washes. Inside the bank, the air conditioning hit me like a wave. I felt small, standing in line behind men in suits and women with perfect hair holding folders full of numbers that meant power. When it was my turn, I stepped forward to the teller and said softly, "I'd like to check my account, please." "I think there's been a confusion." The young woman smiled politely and typed on her screen. Her eyes flicked up to me, then back down, then up again. Something about her hesitation made my stomach twist.
"Mrs. Cole," she said slowly, "I'm not seeing any deposits from the name you mentioned. You said it's Nora Cole?" "Yes," I whispered. "My daughter-in-law." She frowned. "There are no transfers under that name. The last deposit we received was from your church charity fund 3 months ago." My knees went weak. For a moment, I thought I'd collapse right there on the marble floor. When I walked out of that bank, I felt like a ghost wandering through sunlight, invisible, unwanted, and hollow. But along with the heartbreak came something else, a spark of determination. That night, I called my son. I could hear noise in the background, laughter, music, the sound of people talking. Another company event, probably. "Evan," I said gently, "I went to the bank today." He sounded distracted. "Yeah? Did they fix the issue?" "There is no issue," I replied. "They said there have been no deposits at all. Not from you, not from Nora." There was silence, then a short, awkward laugh. "That's impossible. Nora told me—" "Evan," I interrupted, my voice trembling, "please, just check for yourself." He sighed, and for a brief moment, I heard doubt creeping into his tone. "All right, Mom, I'll look into it. I'm sure it's just some kind of mix-up." But we both knew something wasn't right. 2 days later, Nora showed up at my door again, unannounced. She brought a box of imported chocolates, wrapped so beautifully it almost felt like an apology. But her eyes gave her away. There was tension there, sharp, nervous, almost angry. "I heard you went to the bank," she said without even stepping inside. "I did. They said there were no transfers." She twitched into a tight smile. "Maybe you went to the wrong branch. You know how confusing online transfers can be for people your age." That last line cut deeper than she knew. I stared at her for a moment, seeing through the mask of sympathy she tried to wear. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about being caught. That night, I sat by the window, notebook open, pen trembling in my hand. I wrote down every word of our conversation, every expression she made, every lie that flickered in her eyes. I began to wonder, how much did Evan really know? Was he part of this, or just another victim of her charm? The days passed quietly, each one blending into the next, but my instincts kept telling me something bigger was going on. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, an old friend of Charles's named Patrick Lee. He had worked in accounting for one of Evan's companies years ago, before retiring to the countryside. If anyone could guide me on how to trace missing money, it was him. When I explained the situation over the phone, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Evelyn, do you trust me?" I replied, "With my life." "Good," he said. "Then promise me something. Don't tell anyone we talked. I'll start looking into the company's financial records. If she's diverting funds, we'll find it." The relief I felt in that moment was overwhelming. For the first time in months, I wasn't alone. Someone believed me. Weeks passed, and Patrick kept his word. Late at night, he would send me updates from a private number. "She's clever," he said once, "using ghost accounts, transferring small amounts under different supplier names. But the totals? They match what Evans said he sent." I couldn't sleep. Every detail he uncovered was another knife in my chest. Nora had taken everything: the money, the trust, the respect I had in my son's eyes. And still, I kept quiet. I waited. Because when you've been humiliated in silence for long enough, you learn that timing is everything. Then came the call that changed everything. Patrick's voice trembled slightly when he said, "Evelyn, I've found something. Not just about your money. She's been siphoning from Evan's company, too." I remember gripping the phone tighter, my heart racing. "Are you sure?" "Positive. If she's exposed, she'll lose everything: her reputation, her lifestyle, maybe even her freedom." That was the first night I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring into the darkness, whispering, "Unless she took my peace, now I'll take her lies." What would you have done if I were you? Would you go straight to your son with the evidence? Risk him defending her again? Or would you wait, watch her destroy herself, one deceitful act at a time? I chose the latter. And oh, how sweet patience can taste when justice starts to bloom. The following morning, I woke up before sunrise. I couldn't sleep. My heart was racing, my mind restless, tangled in questions that had no easy answers. How could someone who shared our table, who smiled for family photos, who called me mom, be capable of such cruelty? But you know what they say, silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the sound of strategy. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen window, watching the first light spill over the garden Charles and I once tended together. I whispered, "You'd know what to do, wouldn't you, Charles?" And though there was no answer, I could almost hear his steady voice in my head. "You've always been stronger than you think." That was the moment I stopped being afraid.
I called Patrick later that morning. "It's time," I said. He hesitated for a moment, then replied, "You have a plan?" "I do,"
I said quietly, but I need to make sure it hurts her where it matters most, in her pride. He chuckled softly. Then let's make it elegant. Over the next few weeks, Patrick and I worked in secret. He helped me gather every piece of evidence: bank statements, fake invoices, transaction trails, all leading straight to Nora. I couldn't believe how reckless she'd been. She had set up fake supplier accounts using slightly altered names from real ones, siphoning thousands at a time. It was brilliant in a heartless kind of way, and every dollar she stole had a paper trail. Patrick printed everything, organized it neatly, and handed it to me in a plain brown envelope. "Don't use this until you're ready," he warned. "If she suspects you know, she'll cover her tracks faster than you can blink." I nodded. I knew what I had to do. I started calling Evan more often, pretending things were fine. I'd ask about his work, his projects, his health. Sometimes he sounded tired, even lonely. The more I listened, the more I realized something. Nora was controlling more than just his money. She was controlling his life. One evening while on the phone, I said gently, "You work so hard, Evan. Why don't you both come over for dinner next Sunday? It's been so long since we sat down together, just family." There was a pause. "I'll ask Nora," he said. Of course. He always had to ask Nora. When he finally confirmed they'd come, I felt a nervous calm wash over me. The house needed to be spotless. Not because I cared what Nora thought, but because this was the stage, and every lie she'd ever told would find its spotlight here. I spent 2 days cooking, cleaning, setting the table just the way Charles used to like it. I even brought out the old china set from our wedding, a quiet reminder of what real commitment looked like. When Sunday came, I wore a soft lavender dress and tied my hair back. I didn't want to look angry or broken. I wanted to look composed, because revenge, my dear, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's graceful. They arrived right on time. Evan walked in first, smiling awkwardly, holding another bouquet. Nora followed behind, tall, polished, wearing a white designer dress that looked too sharp for my small dining room. "Everything smells lovely," she said, her voice sugar-coated, but her eyes cold. "Thank you," I replied. "Sit down, please. Dinner's ready." As we ate, I noticed how she subtly corrected everything I said, a word here, a story there, always reminding me in her own delicate way that I didn't belong in their world anymore. Evan barely noticed. He was lost in his phone, answering emails between bites. When dessert came, I brought out a small apple pie, his childhood favorite. He smiled, genuine, for the first time that evening. "This takes me back," he said softly. "That's the idea." Then I looked directly at Nora. "You know, I was thinking about family traditions lately, about honesty, about how the truth has a funny way of finding its way home." Her smile faltered, just slightly. Evan looked up. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I took a deep breath and reached under the table for the envelope I'd hidden beneath my seat. My fingers trembled as I set it on the table between us. "This," I said quietly, "is what I'm talking about." Nora's face went pale. She didn't even try to touch it. "What's this?" Evan asked, confused. "Proof. Proof that the money you thought was helping me never arrived. Proof that someone else has been receiving it. And proof that someone has been stealing from your company, too." The room went silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, loud, rhythmic, like a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. Evan's eyes darted between us. "That's ridiculous," Nora said finally, forcing a laugh. "Mom, this is absurd. You've been reading things online again, haven't you? Patrick Lee isn't even working anymore, is he?" The way she said his name told me everything. She knew we'd been in touch. Evan frowned. "Wait, Patrick? Dad's old accountant?" Nora's jaw tightened. "He's irrelevant." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just said softly, "If he's irrelevant, then why did you forge his signature?" The blood drained from her face. Evan's eyes widened. He reached for the envelope and began flipping through the papers. The color in his cheeks changed as he realized what he was looking at. Line after line of transactions, fake account names, bank transfers matching his company's records. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he whispered, "Nora, tell me this isn't true." She stammered, her voice cracking for the first time since I'd known her. "Evan, listen, it's not what it looks like. I was managing some side accounts, just temporary." "Side accounts? $10,000 a month to my mother that you never sent? And this isn't side business. This is fraud." She stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and be accused in your mother's house." I looked at her, calm, steady, almost pitying. "No, dear, you don't, but you will have to sit in court." She froze, realizing what I meant.
Patrick had already filed the preliminary report. Evan's company's legal team was notified that morning. She was already cornered. She just didn't know it until that moment. Evan sank into his chair, his face buried in his hands. For the first time, I saw him not as the powerful businessman everyone admired, but as my little boy again, lost, heartbroken, betrayed. What would you have done if you were me? Would you have comforted your son or let him sit in the silence he helped create? I'll admit, I did both. Because sometimes love means letting someone feel the full weight of their choices. That night, as they left, Evan silent, Nora trembling, I stood by the window watching their car disappear down the dark road. And for the first time in months, my house didn't feel small anymore. It felt steady. But my story wasn't over yet. The truth was out, but justice, real justice, was still waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's face at the dinner table. The disbelief, the betrayal, the silent war between love and truth. I had imagined that confrontation 1,000 times in my head, but reality was heavier. When dawn broke, I sat on the porch wrapped in my shawl, the morning air cold against my skin. A part of me wanted to cry, to let it all out, but the tears just wouldn't come. Maybe I had cried them all already. Maybe this was what strength looked like. Dry eyes and a steady heart. Later that day, I got a call. It was Patrick. His voice was calm but firm. "It's happening, Evelyn. The company's auditors verified everything. Evan confronted the board this morning." I didn't ask how it went. I could hear the exhaustion in his tone and the victory underneath it. 2 days later, I received an email from Evan. It was short. "Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. You were right." Just 6 words, but they hit harder than any apology could. When I saw the news online a week later, my hands shook as I held the phone. "Local businesswoman under investigation for financial misconduct," the headline read. There she was, Nora, her perfect hair, her carefully crafted smile, now reduced to a grainy photograph beneath bold black letters. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, but I did feel something shift inside me, like the air after a long storm finally clearing. Evan came to visit a few days later. He looked tired, older somehow, like he had aged 10 years in 1 week. He sat down quietly, not speaking for a while. Then he said, "They're pressing charges. The board wants a full investigation. She'll have to return everything she took, from the company and from you." I watched his hands tremble slightly as he spoke. He wasn't the confident, untouchable man I'd raised. He was my boy again, humbled by the truth. "I never wanted to believe you could be wrong about someone you loved," he whispered. "But I see it now. You were just trying to protect me." I reached out and placed my hand over his. "Love blinds us sometimes," I said softly. "But truth always finds a way." For the next few weeks, the story spread like wildfire. Local papers, business magazines, everyone was talking about the Cole financial scandal. Nora went from socialite to suspect overnight. The woman who once looked down on me from her marble kitchen was now walking in and out of courtrooms in borrowed coats, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. The first hearing was closed to the public, but I was there, sitting quietly in the back row. Nora refused to look at me, though I could feel the tension in her shoulders every time her lawyer mentioned my name. Evan sat beside me, his expression hard, unreadable. When the prosecution presented the evidence Patrick and I had gathered, the forged documents, the unauthorized transfers, the fake supplier accounts, Nora's composure cracked. She whispered something to her attorney, who shook his head slowly. Then the judge looked at her and said, "Mrs. Cole, this is not a misunderstanding. This is deliberate deception, committed over many months. You not only stole from your husband's company, but you exploited his mother, an elderly widow who trusted you." For the first time since this began, I saw her break. Her voice wavered. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I wanted security." The judge leaned forward. "At the cost of your family?" Nora's eyes filled with tears. "I loved them." And maybe in her own selfish way she believed that. But love without honesty isn't love. It's possession. When the verdict was read, guilty of financial misconduct, ordered to repay the stolen funds, and permanently barred from accessing her husband's accounts, I didn't cheer. I didn't even move. I just breathed. Deeply. Freely. For the first time in almost a year. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Evan and I stood side by side, saying nothing. He slipped his arm around my shoulder, the first time he'd done that since his wedding, and whispered, "Let's go home." Home. That word never sounded sweeter. That evening, as I sat alone in the living room, the house felt different. Lighter. The weight I had carried, of silence, of humiliation, of being unseen, was gone. The walls that once echoed with loneliness now held peace again.
But the world doesn't just move on after something like that. Whispers followed us everywhere. Some people pitied me, some admired me, but most just couldn't believe a story like ours was true. And maybe that's what made me realize something important. I wasn't the only one. There were so many others out there, mothers, fathers, grandparents, who were being used, ignored, manipulated, and financially drained by the people they trusted most. That thought didn't make me angry. It made me determined. So I did something that even surprised myself. I took what was left of the settlement money and founded a small organization, Silver Hands Foundation. Its mission was simple: to help elderly victims of financial abuse reclaim their dignity and their justice. Patrick helped me design the system. Evan donated the first large check to get it running. And soon we were receiving letters from all over Texas. People thanking us for giving them hope, for making them feel seen again. That foundation became my new purpose. Every person we helped reminded me that pain, when turned into purpose, becomes power. And as for Nora, she disappeared. Some said she moved out of state, others whispered about her trying to start over under a new name. I never tried to find her. I didn't need to. She already knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. What would you have done if you were me? Would you forgive her, forget her, or keep her name as a reminder that even the prettiest smiles can hide the darkest greed? I chose forgiveness, not for her, but for me, because revenge might satisfy you, but forgiveness sets you free. When Evan visits now, he stays longer. We talk about life, about Dad, and about how easily people lose sight of what matters when money becomes louder than love. And sometimes he still says sorry, quietly, sincerely. But I tell him, it's all right, son. Some lessons are meant to hurt a little. Last month, the foundation received a state award for community service. They called my name, and as I walked onto that small stage, the crowd clapped, not for me, but for every elderly voice finally being heard. I looked out at the sea of faces and thought about how far we'd come. Truth, after all, isn't just a weapon, it's light. And sometimes shining that light even through tears is the greatest revenge of all. It's strange how life feels quieter after justice. Not emptier, just quieter, like the world finally exhales after holding its breath for too long. Weeks passed, the scandal faded from headlines, reporters moved on to new stories, people found new gossip to whisper about, and the world kept spinning, as it always does. But for me, time moved slower, softer, like it wanted me to notice the stillness I had once begged for. One morning, I was sitting by the window with a cup of tea when I found a small envelope in my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Inside was a single folded letter. It was from Nora. "Evelyn," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness, and I know no apology can undo what I did. But I want you to know that I've been working, cleaning offices at night, trying to pay back what I owe, trying to make peace with myself. You didn't just expose me, you forced me to see what I'd become. And though I hate how it ended, I'll always remember how kind you were to me once. I hope someday you can remember that too." The letter ended there. No address, no signature, just that quiet plea in ink. I folded it back carefully and placed it in my drawer, next to a photo of Evan as a child, holding a paper flower he'd made for me in kindergarten. For a moment, both faces, the innocent boy and the woman who betrayed us, blurred in my mind like two sides of the same story. And I realized something. Sometimes people break not because they're evil, but because they're empty. And empty people try to fill themselves with whatever shines, money, status, admiration, until they lose sight of the simple truth that love is enough. I chose not to tell Evan about the letter. He'd made peace in his own way. He was healing, spending more time at the foundation, donating anonymously to families who'd been scammed, mentoring young entrepreneurs about ethical wealth, as he called it. I didn't want to reopen wounds that were finally closing. Instead, I sat down at my desk, took out my journal, and began to write a letter of my own. Not to Nora, not even to Evan, but to myself. "Dear Evelyn," I wrote, "you thought growing old meant losing everything. Your husband, your youth, your place in the world. But you were wrong. Growing old means seeing clearly the people who stayed, the lessons that stayed, the love that stayed. And that clarity is your reward." As I wrote those words, I smiled through quiet tears, because I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a story for anyone who's ever been forgotten, silenced, or betrayed by the ones they loved most. And if you're hearing my story now, maybe it's because life wanted to remind you, even when they take everything, they can't take your truth. Months later, during one of our community meetings, a woman came up to me, gray-haired, nervous, holding an old purse. She said, "I heard your story online. It gave me courage to stand up to my son. I didn't lose him. I got him back." I hugged her, tight, because that's what it's all about. Not revenge, not punishment, just healing. When I got home that night, Evan was waiting at the porch. He was smiling, a real smile this time, the kind I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Mom," he said, "I bought back the old beach house, the one Dad built." I blinked in surprise. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged. "Because I want you to have something that's truly yours again. No bank accounts, no papers, no signatures. Just home." I felt my throat tighten as I looked at him. "I had already given me that, Evan." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "You came back." He didn't reply. He just wrapped his arms around me, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. The world felt right again. Now, as I sit here writing these last lines, the sun is setting over the garden, painting everything gold. My tea has gone cold, but I don't mind. There's peace in this quiet. A kind of peace you can't buy or steal, only earn. And maybe that's the real lesson life gave me. Forgiveness doesn't erase what they did. It just sets you free from having to relive it. So if you've ever been betrayed, used, or forgotten, don't let bitterness define you. Let it refine you. Because one day the truth will speak for itself. And when it does, stand tall like I did, not with anger, but with grace. This is my story, and if it reached you, maybe it was meant to.